My half-sister introduced me at her husband's promotion gala by pointing across the room and saying, loud enough for 12 people to hear, "Oh, that's just Faye. She drives a school bus." Then she laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd said all evening. I smiled. I always smile. But the man sitting 2 seats to her left had gone very still, and he was looking at me like he was trying to place a face he hadn't seen in a long time. I want to tell you what happened that night. But first, let me tell you who I am. My name is Faye. I'm 31 years old, and yes, I drive a school bus. Route 14, Clarksville Elementary to Ridgewood Middle, Monday through Friday, 6:45 in the morning, and again at 3:20 in the afternoon. I've been doing it for 6 years. Before that, I did 2 years at the community college studying early childhood education, ran out of money, took the bus job thinking it would be temporary, and then discovered something I didn't expect. I was good at it. Not just technically good at it. Not was good with the kids. Good at noticing which ones were having a hard morning, which ones needed someone to ask how the soccer game went, which ones got dropped off at the wrong stop because nobody at home remembered the schedule changed. It's not glamorous. I know that. My half-sister Adrienne has known that for years, and she has never once let me forget it. Adrienne and I share a father. That's the whole of it. Her mother and my mother were 2 different women who both, at different points in time, made the mistake of loving the same unreliable man. My mother raised me alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. Adrienne's mother married into money, divorced into more of it, and raised Adrienne in a house with a pool in Scottsdale. We met for the first time at our father's funeral when I was 19 and she was 23. She looked at my discount rack dress and my scuffed shoes and made up her mind about me in about 45 seconds. I could tell. Some people have a very particular kind of smile they use when they've already decided you don't matter. Adrienne had that smile down perfectly. We stayed in loose contact over the years. Christmas cards, the occasional text when one of us felt obligated. When she got married 3 years ago, I wasn't invited to the wedding. I found out through a cousin posting photos on Facebook. I told myself it didn't bother me. Mostly that was true. So when she called me in February and said she and her husband were hosting a gala for his company promotion and she wanted me there, I was surprised. She said she wanted family present. She used that word like it meant something. I ironed my nicest dress, drove 4 hours to Chicago, and checked into the cheapest hotel I could find within walking distance of the venue. The gala was held at a private event space downtown. The kind of place with vaulted ceilings and a coat check and wait staff who move so quietly you almost don't notice them refilling your glass. Adrienne's husband Brett had just been named regional vice president of a commercial real estate firm. There were maybe 80 people in the room. Most of them were in suits that cost more than my monthly rent. I arrived a few minutes after the cocktail hour started. Adrienne spotted me near the entrance, gave me a quick hug that lasted about 1 second, and said, "You made it. Good. Get a drink." Then she moved on to someone more important. I'm used to that. I found a spot near one of the tall tables along the wall, accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter, and did what I always do at events like this. I watched people. It's something I've gotten good at over years of watching a bus full of kids. You learn to read a room when you spend your mornings watching 30 small humans figure out how to be around each other. There was a group of maybe 10 or 12 people near the center of the room who seemed to be the inner circle, Brett's colleagues and their spouses, the firm's senior partners. Adrienne floated in and out of that group like she'd been born into it. She probably felt like she had. Dinner was called about an hour in. Round tables, assigned seating, centerpieces with white orchids. I found my place card near the back of the room, which I expected. What I didn't expect was that the table happened to be adjacent to the one where Brett's senior partners were seated. I sat down next to an older couple who introduced themselves politely and then mostly talked to each other. Across from me, a younger man in a gray suit was scrolling his phone. Nobody paid me much attention, which was fine. I ate my salad and listened to the room. About 20 minutes into dinner, Adrienne made her rounds again. She stopped at the table where the senior partners were seated, laughed at something someone said, and then, I still don't know exactly why she did it, whether it was genuine cruelty or just thoughtlessness. She turned and looked in my direction. "Oh!" she said loud and bright, like she'd just remembered something amusing. She gestured toward me. "That's my half-sister Faye over there. We don't really look alike, do we?" A few people glanced over politely. "She drives a school bus," Adrienne added, and then laughed, light and dismissive, the way you describe someone's hobby that you found slightly embarrassing. You know, for the kids. A couple of people gave the kind of vague smiles that mean they didn't know what to say. Someone murmured, "Oh, how nice." The conversation moved on. I looked down at my plate. The feeling in my chest was something I knew well, a tightening like being pressed from both sides. I had felt it the first time she met me at our father's funeral and looked at my shoes. I had felt it every time someone found out what I did and their voice went just slightly flat with disinterest. I took a breath. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I had learned a long time ago that defending yourself in moments like that usually just gives the other person more ammunition. I picked up my fork and kept eating. But then, from the senior partners table, something shifted. A man I hadn't noticed before had gone quiet. He was maybe 65, silver at the temples, the kind of solid and still that makes you think of someone who spent years learning not to react to everything immediately. He'd been talking to the woman beside him a moment ago. Now he wasn't. He was looking in my direction. Not rudely, not with hostility, just looking, carefully. The way you look at someone when something in the back of your mind is working on a problem it hasn't solved yet. I noticed it and then looked away. Maybe he'd heard Adrienne's comment and was trying to decide how he felt about it. Maybe he was just spacing out and happened to be facing my direction. People don't always have a reason for where their eyes land. The dinner continued. Plates were cleared. The speeches began. Brett thanked his colleagues, his mentors, his wife. Adrienne cried one perfect tear at the right moment. People applauded. Someone tapped a glass and told a long-winded story about Brett closing a difficult deal in 2019. I clapped when everyone else clapped, but from the corner of my eye, I noticed the older man glance toward me twice more during the speeches. After the formal program, the room loosened up again. People stood, moved around, clustered in new conversations. The waitstaff brought out dessert. A small jazz quartet started playing in the corner. I was standing near the dessert table considering whether to take the chocolate mousse or the lemon tart when I heard a voice beside me. "Excuse me." I turned. It was him. The older man with silver hair. Up close, he was taller than I'd registered, and his expression was something I could only describe as careful, like someone who has learned to check themselves before speaking. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said. Forgive me, but have you worked Route 14 out of Clarksville for long?" I stared at him for a second. Out of all the things I'd expected him to say, that was not on the list. 6 years, I said. "Why?" He exhaled slowly. Not dramatically. Just the exhale of someone who's been holding a question for a while and has finally found a place to put it down. "I thought so," he said quietly. "You're the one who stopped." And then I knew. The specific weight of those words, the way he said them, the look on his face. I knew exactly what he was talking about, even though it had been over 2 years. Some moments get stored differently than others. Some of them don't fade. It was an October morning in 2022. I was running slightly behind on my route because of a backup on the bypass. It was raining, the hard gray kind of rain that makes everything look like it's underwater. I had 22 kids on the bus. I just dropped off the Clarksville stop and was coming down Ridgewood Road when I saw a car on the shoulder with its hazard lights on. I almost didn't stop. I'm not supposed to, technically, not with kids on board. But something made me pull over. There was a man slumped over the wheel. I could see it from where I'd stopped, even through the rain. I told the kids to stay seated, that we were just taking a quick stop, and I used my firmest voice, the one I save for the moments when I really need them to listen. They listened. I got off the bus, crossed to the car, knocked on the window. He was conscious, but barely. He was holding his left arm and his color was wrong, gray and damp in a way that had nothing to do with the rain. I called 911. While I waited, I stayed with him, talked to him, made sure he kept his eyes open. I don't have medical training beyond the standard first aid certification they require for bus drivers, so there was a limit to what I could do. Mostly, I just kept him talking. I told him my name, told him I wasn't going anywhere, asked him simple questions to keep him present. "What's your name? Do you have family nearby? What do you do for work?" His name, he told me slowly, was Arthur. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. They said it was a heart attack. They said he was lucky someone stopped. I walked back to my bus, told the kids we were going to be a little late, and drove the rest of the route. I called the district office from the next stop to explain the delay. I filed an incident report. I didn't think much more about it because that's the thing about those moments. They feel enormous when they're happening, and then you file the paperwork and drive home and make dinner, and eventually they just become part of the texture of the days. I had never known what happened to Arthur after the ambulance took him, and now he was standing in front of me at a gala in Chicago 2 years and 3 months later, telling me he thought he recognized me. "How are you?" I asked. I wasn't sure what else to say. "I'm here," he said, and something in the way he said it, like being here was a fact still worth remarking on, made my throat tighten. "I had surgery 2 days after. Double bypass, 3 months of cardiac rehab." He paused. "The doctors told me that 10 more minutes without intervention would probably have been too long." He looked at me steadily. "I didn't know your name," he said. I tried to find out. I called the school district's transportation office. They said they couldn't give out information about their drivers. I wrote a letter. I don't know if it ever went anywhere. It hadn't. Or if it had, no one had passed it to me. That didn't surprise me. "I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "I've been wanting to say that for 2 years. I have a wife, 3 grown kids, 4 grandchildren, the youngest just turned 1 in March." He stopped. I don't think I'm supposed to get emotional at my own firm's gala, but here we are. I didn't know what to say, so I said the thing that was true. "I'm glad I stopped." "So am I," he said. We stood there for a moment, which might sound awkward, but wasn't. It was the kind of quiet that feels like it has weight, like something real is sitting in it. Then, from about 15 feet away, I heard Adrienne's voice. "Arthur, there you are. Brett was looking for you about the Henderson proposal." She stopped. She had followed him over and was now looking at the 2 of us standing close together at the dessert table. Her expression was confused. "Do you 2 know each other?" Arthur turned to look at her, and the warmth in his face, the open, emotional quality of it went somewhere else. Not hostile, just calibrated. The way someone looks when they're about to say something they've considered carefully. "Your sister stopped on the side of Ridgewood Road in October of 2022, he said. "I was having a heart attack in my car. She called for help and stayed with me until the paramedics arrived." He paused. "She's the reason I was able to watch my youngest grandchild be born last March." Adrienne went very still. A few people nearby had caught the tail end of what he said. Conversation slowed. One of the women from the senior partners' table had turned toward us. The man in the gray suit who'd been on his phone earlier was listening now. Arthur wasn't performing. He wasn't trying to make a scene. He was just saying what was true in a room full of people, and the truth had a way of carrying. "I've been trying to find out her name for 2 years, he continued in the same even tone. "And you introduced her tonight as just a school bus driver." He said it without heat. He didn't need heat. The contrast between what he'd said and what she'd said was doing all the work on its own. I want to be very clear about something. There is no such thing as just in front of that job, not when the person doing it is paying attention. Adrienne's face was doing something complicated. I recognized it distantly. It was the face she hadn't shown me at our father's funeral, or at any point since, but which I imagined existed somewhere underneath. The face of someone realizing they've been wrong out loud, in front of people, and can't find a graceful exit. She looked at me. I looked back at her. I didn't say anything. I had learned not to. "Faye," she said finally. Her voice was different, smaller, and more careful. "I didn't know." "You didn't have to know," I said. And I meant it, not as a rebuke, just as a fact. The value of a thing doesn't depend on who witnesses it. Brett had found his way over by then. Drawn by the shift in the room's atmosphere, Arthur explained briefly, and I watched Brett's face move through surprise and then something that looked like genuine embarrassment, not on my behalf but on his own, for being married to someone who had dismissed me the way she had. He shook my hand and held it a little too long, the way people do when they're trying to communicate something that words haven't quite caught up to yet. The gala moved on. Events like that don't stop for moments of reckoning. The quartet played. The desserts were finished. People drifted to their cars in small clusters, and the event staff began quietly folding up the white tablecloths. Before I left, Arthur found me near the coat check. He gave me a business card. He said if there was ever anything he could do, he meant it in the most literal possible way. I took the card. I don't know yet what I'll do with it. Adrienne caught me at the door. I thought she might try to minimize it, find some way to reframe the evening so that she could go home without having to hold what had happened. Instead, she said, quietly, "I'm sorry for what I said about the bus driving." She paused. "I'm sorry for a lot of things. I don't know if she meant it the way it needs to be meant to actually change something. I don't know her well enough to know the difference between a real apology and a social one. But she said it. And I said, okay, because I meant that too. Not as forgiveness exactly, but as an acknowledgement that the door was still open, if she wanted to walk through it differently someday." I drove back to my hotel. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark for a while, not thinking about Adrienne, not thinking about what Arthur had said, just thinking about that morning in October. The rain on the windshield. The 22 kids behind me, quiet for once, because I'd used the voice. Arthur's hands on the steering wheel, and his color, and the 11 minutes. I had not thought of myself as someone who had done something that day. I had thought of myself as someone who was late on their route. That gap, between what a moment means to you and what it means to someone else, is one of the stranger things I've discovered about living. You move through your days doing what the day asks of you, and somewhere downstream, in a life you'll never fully see, something you did without thinking is the reason a man is alive to meet his grandchild. I don't tell you this because I want credit for it. I tell you this because I think there are a lot of people like me, people whose work the world underlines in pencil instead of ink, people who do careful and necessary things in the quiet parts of days that nobody photographs. And I think those people deserve to know that the pencil marks are still there. The work counts whether or not the room applauds. Drive your route. Pay attention. Stop when something tells you to stop. That's all any of it ever is. I keep thinking about the 11 minutes. That's how long it took for the paramedics to arrive on Ridgewood Road. 11 minutes in the rain with 22 kids sitting quietly behind me because I'd used the voice. 11 minutes that I filed in an incident report and mostly forgot about because the day asked me to keep driving and I did. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, is that those 11 minutes were living a separate life somewhere I'd never see. They were present at a cardiac rehab session in a hospital I'd never visited. They were in the room when a grandchild was born last March. They were sitting at a table at a gala in Chicago in the body of a man named Arthur who had spent 2 years trying to find out my name. That's the thing about doing right by a moment. It doesn't disappear just because you stopped watching it. I didn't stop for Arthur because I calculated what it might one day return to me. I stopped because something in me knew it was the wrong thing to keep driving. That's what I'd call character, the kind that doesn't need an audience. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It's just the quiet agreement you make with yourself about who you're going to be when the situation costs you something. In that case, a late route, a filed report, a heart beating fast while I knocked on a rain-wet window. And then there's what it takes to keep showing up to work that the world underlines in pencil. 6 years of the same route. 6 years of learning which kids needed someone to notice them, which mornings required patience I didn't always have in ready supply, which moments asked me to pay attention when it would have been easier not to. That takes a particular kind of endurance. Not the loud kind, not the kind that gets written about. Just the steady, daily decision to do the job well, because the job is worth doing well. That kind of endurance builds something in you over time. It makes you someone who stops on the side of a road in the rain when something tells you to stop. What happened with Adrienne, I don't think of as justice, exactly. I think of it as consequence. She had spent years making small calculations about people, sorting them by visible markers, by salary, by the kind of car they drove to an event. Those calculations had a cost she wasn't tracking. They narrowed her world without her realizing it. Arthur didn't correct her to be cruel. He said what was true, in the plainest possible way, because the truth was worth saying. And the room heard it, not because anyone was performing, but because honest things have a way of landing differently than everything else. I drove home from Chicago thinking about all the people I know who do careful, necessary work in the quiet parts of days that nobody photographs. The nurse who stays an extra 20 minutes. The teacher who remembers a kid's name 3 years later. The driver who notices. None of them are doing it for the Gala story. They're doing it because that's who they decided to be a long time ago in a moment nobody was watching. That decision is the whole thing. Everything else is just the 11 minutes finding their way home.